Hello everyone, I am Mrs.V.P.Gayathri, Assistant Professor, Department of English, DKM College for Women. In this lecture, we are going to learn about a beautiful poem called Birches, written by Robert Lee Frost. The lecture is planned this way. I have planned out the lecture this way. First, we'll briefly touch upon Robert Frost, the author, very briefly, because I want you guys to read up on Frost and discover Frost for yourself. So very brief touching upon the author, and then I'll read out the poem, and then a line by line description of the poem, line by line analysis of the poem, and then the thematic significance and the literary devices used by the poet, and then a brief sum up. With that, the lecture would get over. That is how the lecture is planned. So let us go to Birches, written by a very famous American poet called Robert Lee Frost. Most of you would be familiar with this man. This man is the most beloved, very well known of the American poets. Born in the year 1840, passed away in the year 1963. He is considered to be the unofficial poet laureate of the United States. Very well honored, had received a lot of literary awards. In fact, he had been the recipient of 4 consecutive Pulitzer Prizes, and then he was the first poet to have been given the honor to read out his poem, one of his poems in a presidential inauguration, that of John F. Kennedy. So he has a rare honor. Okay. So one more poet that springs to mind is Maya Angelou, who was also given the same honor by Obama when she did up one of her poems in his inauguration. So the first president was set by Robert Frost when he read one of his poems in President John F. Kennedy's inauguration. So born in the year 1840, 1963 in New England, and then I'm going to briefly talk about Robert Frost. As I told you, I'm not going to talk about his life details, his biography. All that is for you to discover. I'm just going to tell you that Robert Frost is a quintessentially modern poet, very modern poet. And then he wrote poetry. He experimented with language. He used the spoken language, especially the farmer's dialect that was used in New England. At the same time, one remarkable thing about Robert Frost is that he stuck on to traditional verses. He was not one to use free verse. He stuck on to the traditional meters. You can see him using iambic pentameter. You can see him using blank verse in his poetry. So that is one remarkable thing about Robert Frost. And another significant detail that you note when you are reading or studying Robert Frost's poems are that his poems are deceptively simple. That is very, you can be easily taken in. You think, what kind of a poem is this? This is such a simple poem. Why is a poet writing such a simple thing? Why would he write a poem on such simple things, on such everyday things, everyday things that you see maybe on the side of the road? So why would he do that? Such deceptively simple poems, but then which are very complex psychological portraits, philosophical portraits. In this manner, Robert Frost is something similar to what Wordsworth said in his preface to Lyrical Ballads. The function of poetry is to take away the film of familiarity that is coated onto the things that you see in everyday life. So that is what Frost precisely does. He defamiliarizes the normal everyday things that you see. Okay, so that is one specialty of Robert Frost. And then you also notice that Robert Frost's poems are set in a rural background, especially that of New England. And then his very famous poems are Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, Mending Wall, The Road Not Taken. There are so many other things, After Apple Picking, Birches, of course, Home Burial. There are so many poems that spring to mind. So when you talk about Robert Frost, this is a very brief intro that I have given you about Robert Frost. Now we go on to Birches, the poem. Before we read out the poem, I want to show you a few pictures of Birches, because being in India, this is not a common sight. Students won't be familiar with the sight of Birches. This is not a common tree that is found in India. So it's better to take a look at Birches. You see that they have white trunks, very slender trunks, and the next picture will show you Birches bent. This is one thing which you are going to see continuously as you read the poem, as you study the poem along with me. You'll be seeing this particular image of bent birch trees. This is a birch tree. Look at how slender the trunks are. So bent birch trees. So this is one thing which I want you to get familiar with. So the picture of 2 bent birch trees. So this is something, this is an image Frost is going to use continuously throughout his poem Birches. Okay, so then the next one, the poem begins. I'm going to read out the poem, okay, and then we're going to discuss line by line. Okay, so shall we? Okay, so Birches by Robert Lee Frost. When I see birches bend to left and right, across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay, as ice storms do. Often, you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after a rain. They click upon themselves as the breeze rises and turn many-colored as the stir cracks and crazes their enamel. Soon, the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Such heaps of broken glass to sweep away, you'd think the inner dome of heaven had fallen. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break, though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves. You may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. But I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about ice storm, I should prefer to have some boy bend them as he went out and in to fetch the cows. Some boy too far from town to learn baseball, whose only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by riding them down over and over again, until he took the stiffness out of them, and not one but hung limp, not one was left for him to conquer. He learned all there was to learn about not launching up too soon, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. He always kept his poise to the top branches, climbing carefully with the same pains you used to fill a cup up to the brim and even above the brim. Then he flung outward, feet first, with a swish, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. So was I once myself a swinger of birches, and so I dream of going back to be. It's when I am weary of considerations and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with the cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twigs having lashed across it open. I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away, not to return. Earth is the right place for love. I don't know where it's likely to go better. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow-white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. One could do worse than be a swinger of birches. So that's a beautiful poem. And go back to slide 1, the beginning of the poem. So, as you see, birches, the title of the poem. I showed you pictures of birches. Now we go on to the poem. This poem, before we begin, I would like to tell you that this poem is written in a single stanza. If you notice, there are no breaks. It's a single stanza. It's written in a single stanza, 59 lines of unrhymed iambic pentameter, that is blank verse. That is how this is written. Even though the poem is written in a single stanza, you can see 3 movements in the poem, 3 sections that you can divide the poem into. First part, from the beginning to this part. But this is the second movement. And then the second movement continues from that line but, and then till there, kicking his way down through the air to the ground. The third movement is from here. So was I once myself a swinger of birches. That's the third movement. So 3 movements you can see in this particular poem, even though it is written in a single stanza. Now we go on to do the poem line by line. Very simple poem. The first part caters to the senses. This is very physical. Frost is going to describe birch trees, the sight of birch trees, which is very common in America. Maybe not in India, but then in America, every road, maybe you get to see these kind of birch trees bent. Okay, so Frost is going to give us a physical description of these birch trees, very physical in tone, very sensual. Okay, you almost can feel the coldness of the winter as Frost is describing the ice-covered birch trees. Now let's go to the poem. When I see birches bend to left and right across the lines of straighter, darker trees, I like to think some boy's been swinging them. But swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Okay, I want you to go back to this picture and see, okay, how across left and right, that's what the poet says. So birch trees left and right, and they are bent, okay, and they are contrasted with straighter, darker trees. Remember, I showed you a picture, okay, wherein you can see the trunk is white, okay, whereas the rest of the trees, the trunks are brown in color. Now this particular birch tree, this is unique about the birch tree in that it has a white trunk. So that is the contrast provided by the white trunk, okay, of the birch tree with the darker trunks of the other trees. Okay, and you see left and right birch trees bent, and probably this is a forest, and so there are darker, straighter, taller trees. Okay, and these trees, slender trees, white trunks, and they are bent left and right. So that is the first scene that is being described by the author. Probably, okay, you have to imagine a person who is walking into the forest, probably Robert Frost himself, or any narrator. Okay, if you don't want to think it is Robert Frost, maybe some guy, okay, who is saying all these lines, who is expressing himself in these lines. So this person is taking a walk into the woods, into the forest, and this is what he sees. This is the sight that encounters him. He sees birch trees bending left and right, okay, contrasted, in contrast to straighter, darker trees across the lines of straighter, darker trees, in contrast to darker, straighter trees, darker because the other trees are brown in color. And when he encounters such a scene, what would he like to think? He would like to think that some boy has been swinging upon these trees, and that is why the trees are bent like that. That is what he would like to think. But then immediately the thought strikes the narrator. No. That is not the truth. Okay, swinging doesn't bend them down to stay as ice storms do. Suppose a boy had climbed over the tree, and suppose he had been swinging on these birch trees. The birch trees would not be bent forever like this. That is not the fact. So what had bent the birch trees in reality? Ice storms. Okay, so that is the reason the birch trees are bent down. Ice storms. Okay, so the trees being slender, they couldn't probably withstand the force of the stormy winter. Okay, so that is why ice storms, okay, the force of the ice storm, that is too much for these slender trees to bear, and so they have bent down. That is the real reason. I want you to mark down these lines. Okay, Frost, or the narrator, would like to imagine, this is one major theme that runs throughout the poem, and I want you to take note of that. Frost would like to think, or the narrator would like us to think, okay, would like to think himself that a boy had been swinging upon the birch trees, and that is why the birch trees are bent down. But that is not the fact. That is only his imagination. So what is the reality? The reality is that ice storms, they are the reality. Okay, so imagination, reality. Note that I am using these two words again and again. Imagination. In the imagination of the poet, birch trees are bent because, okay, of a boy swinging on them. But what is the reality? What is the truth? Ice storms. Okay, I want you to pay attention to these two words that I keep using. Imagination, reality. Okay, then he goes on, moving on. Often you must have seen them. Okay, that's a very common sight. That word often tells you it's a common sight in America. You must have seen them. Okay, this is addressed to the reader. Reader, you must have seen them loaded with ice a sunny winter morning after rain. It's a very common sight. You must have seen a lot of birch trees being covered in ice, okay, on winter mornings after rainfall. That's a common sight. And what would you see? What else would you see? The birch trees would click upon themselves, would rub against each other as the breeze blows. What happens? The trees start rubbing against each other, and then as the breeze rises, meaning to say as the breeze blows, as there is a strong wind, what happens? The birch trees rub against each other, and then what happens? They develop a crack, okay? And soon the sun's rays touching the ice coat. So I want you to imagine these birch trees being coated in ice, okay, all white and already white in color, and the leaves are all covered in snow, and they have an ice coat, okay, and they're rubbing against each other as the wind is blowing. And then what happens? The ice coat cracks, and then what happens? And their enamel-like covering, the ice coat, which is like enamel, okay, that develops cracks and it starts falling down, okay. So that is the next thing. So what do you see? Often you must have seen birch trees on a winter morning, and what will happen as the breeze rises, the birch trees will rub against each other, and then they will develop lots of cracks, okay, because of this rubbing against each other. So the ice coat is developing a lot of cracks. Look at that, crack, crack sound, cracks and crazes, okay. So I want you to note down that cracks, that onomatopoeic sound here, cracks and crazes, okay, they're enamel. So meaning to say the ice coat is broken, right? And then what happens? Soon the sun's warmth makes them shed crystal shells, shattering and avalanching on the snow crust. Look at that, avalanching, once again the use of an onomatopoeic word there. Soon what happens? As the sun rises, the warmth of the sun's rays makes the ice coat melt. And what happens? The tree is shedding shells, okay? Ice crystals are shed by the tree, okay? And these ice shells, they fall down like an avalanche, okay? You know what is an avalanche, isn't it? So the tree, as the sun's rays touch upon the trees, because of the warmth of the sun's rays, the trees shed crystal shells, ice crystals, okay? And they fall down onto the ground, reminding you of an avalanche, okay? Right. And then such heaps of broken glass, because of the sun's warmth, the ice has become clear, okay? Earlier, the ice must have been opaque and white in color, but now the sun's rays had touched the ice, and the ice had started melting. You must have seen this phenomena. As ice starts to melt, it will become crystal clear. So that is why broken glass, so much so, the ice crystals resemble glass pieces, broken glasses, okay, broken glass pieces. So as the tree sheds its ice coat, it resembles broken glass, okay. Under the tree, there are heaps of ice crystals which resemble broken glass pieces, okay. So you would think that some glass had shattered down, okay, had broken down, had broken, and you can sweep them off, okay. That is the impression given by the shattered ice crystals, okay, underneath the birch trees. So much so, when you look at the heaps of ice crystals under the birch trees, you would think that the inner dome, some sphere, some glass sphere in the skies, dome of heaven, okay, meaning to say some sphere, unseen glass sphere, dome meaning sphere in heavens, in the skies, had fallen down. This glass sphere had fallen down, had crashed onto the earth, and that is the remnant, okay. You see the ice crystals resemble glass shards, so much so, you think that some kind of a sphere, unseen sphere in heaven, had fallen down, had crashed, and those are the remains. Those are the remains of the broken sphere in heaven. So what is the idea here? Ice crystals resembling broken glass, okay, right. And then now once again there is a shift. They are dragged to the withered bracken by the load. Now what is this they? They are referring to the birch trees, okay. Now they are dragged to the withered bracken by the load, and they seem not to break. So the birch trees are dragged down to touch the ground, where you see withered bracken. Bracken is a kind of a wild fern, okay, it's a kind of a plant. So the birch trees are bent down, they touch the ground because of the load. What is the load being referred to here? The ice coat, the ice load, you get it? So, and they seem not to break. They are bent because of the load, because of the ice load, but they don't break. That is the beauty, okay? So they seem to bend, they seem to touch down, they seem to graze on the ground, but then they don't break at all, okay? They are only bent. Though once they are bowed so low for long, they never right themselves, okay? This is one fact. What is this particular fact about birch trees? Once they are bowed to touch the ground, they will not straighten themselves up, okay? They are like that, they are bent, okay? So that is one thing. They don't break because of the ice load, but then neither do they straighten themselves up, okay? Once they are bent, they don't straighten themselves up at all, okay? That is one thing you have to remember. Neither are they broken, nor will they straighten themselves up once they are bent by the ice load, okay? And then for years, and then once they are bent, once the birch trees are bent, you may see their trunks arching in the woods years afterwards, trailing their leaves on the ground like girls on hands and knees that throw their hair before them over their heads to dry in the sun. Okay, so for years, once they are bent, for years birch trees stay bent. Okay, they never straighten themselves up. And looking at these bent birch trees, what would you be thinking of? They resemble, there is a simile here. This is one poetic device which is being used by Robert Frost here. So what is he saying here? He is comparing the bent birches to girls. Okay, this is a common sight. Once you walk into the forest, this is what you'll see. Birch trees bent. And once you see them, this is the image that comes to your mind. What? Girls on hands and knees. Okay, you think of girls who are kneeling down, okay, and who have thrown their hair, okay, before them over their heads to dry in the sun. You would think of girls who had thrown their hair like this, okay, in order to be dried in the sun. That is the image that you think of when you see birch trees, their foliage touching the ground. You would immediately be thinking of girls who are kneeling down, who are on their hands and knees, okay, who had thrown their hair over their head in order to be dried in the sun. That is one simile, okay, one poetic device which you would find in the poem, one poetic device which is used by Frost in this particular poem. I hope this is clear. Then what next? Okay, the first movement is over. As I told you, all physical description about the birch trees. Okay, birch trees, common sight, bent left and right, in contrast to straighter, darker trees. Okay, they are loaded with ice. Frost would like to think, or the narrator would like to think, that some boy had been swinging on birch trees and that is why they are bent. But no, that is only the poet's imagination. The reality is ice storms. That is why birch trees are bent. Okay, and as the breeze rises, the ice coat cracks. Okay, and as the sun's warmth becomes too much, what happens? The ice coat crashes onto the ground, making you think that some sphere, hidden sphere in the heavens had broken down, and then once they bend themselves, they will not straighten themselves up, and you can see them bent birch trees in forest for years afterwards. And once you see these bent birch trees, what image do you get? What do you think of immediately? Of girls on their hands and knees, throwing their hair before them and drying them in the sun, okay, drying it in the sun. That is first movement, okay, description of the birch trees, and then what the poet would like to think about the bent birch trees and the reality. First movement is over. The second movement, the second section of the poem, okay, but look at how there is a resounding but there, which separates the first movement from the second movement. So, but I was going to say, when truth broke in with all her matter of fact about the ice storm. But all this is fine. Okay, I was going to say that when truth broke in with all her matter of factness about the ice storm. What was I going to say when truth broke in, okay, about the ice storm? I was going to say something about the birch trees, about the bent birch trees, but exactly at that same point, okay, at that point, what happened? Truth broke in with a kind of a matter of factness, okay, about the ice storm. Now, Frost is going to tell us, the narrator is going to tell us what he had in mind, what he wanted to tell us right in the beginning of the poem, but he was interrupted by truth, okay? Truth saying something about the ice storm. So he says, this is what I wanted to tell you in the beginning. I should prefer to have some boy bend them. This is what I was about to tell you. I would like to think the birch trees are bent because some boy had been bending them, had been swinging upon them, okay? And what follows is a description of the boy. The boy is an imaginary boy, okay? Probably this boy is drawn from the character of the poet himself, the character of the narrator himself. We don't know, but this is an imaginary boy, okay? This is a boy which lives in the imagination of the poet. So, I would like to think, whenever I see bent birches, I would like to think that some boy had been bending them, okay? Had been bending these birch trees when, as he went out and in to fetch the cows, some boy too far from town to learn baseball. His only play was what he found himself, summer or winter, and could play alone. One by one, he subdued his father's trees by writing them down over and over again until he took the stiffness out of them. So, description of the boy, okay? What kind of a boy was he? He was a villager, okay? Very far away, living far away from town, okay? He could not learn city games like baseball. So, he was a boy from a village who could not learn baseball. So, his only play was whatever he found himself, either summer or winter. And he could play alone. He did not need any companions, okay? He could play alone. So, the description of the boy. And then, what did this boy do? One after the other, he kept on bending his father's trees, all the birch trees, one after the other. He rode over them again and again. He swung over them again and again till he took the stiffness out of them. And not one birch tree was left standing straight, Okay, every birch tree was bent down. There was no tree for him to conquer. Till that point was reached, he kept on swinging on the birch trees, and all of the birch trees were bent. Okay, so this boy is the reason behind all the birch trees. So is this real? This is the imagination of the poet. Okay, this boy is completely a figment of the poet's imagination. So not one tree was left for him to conquer. Every tree was bent. Okay, he used to climb upon the trees, he used to swing upon them, he used to make them bent. Okay, one after the other, till no tree was left for him to conquer, for him to bend. And he had mastered the art of bending the birch trees, swinging upon the birch trees. He learned all there was to learn about not launching out too soon. Okay, so he had mastered the art of climbing on the birch trees, reaching to that particular spot, and then jumping and then swinging, so that the tree would not snap, the tree would not break. Okay, so he had mastered the art of climbing, swinging and bending the birch trees. Okay, he had learned. There was nothing more for him to learn about climbing a birch tree or bending a birch tree or swinging a birch tree. Okay, and so not carrying the tree away clear to the ground. So he had mastered this technique, how not to break the birch tree but bend it. Okay, so he had mastered this technique, and then he always kept his poise, he always kept his control. Okay, to the top branches, he never slipped, he kept his poise. Okay, very steadily he used to climb to the top branches, very carefully, with the same pains. Once again, there is a simile here. The first simile was the girls. Okay, now you have the second simile here. He used to climb the birch trees very carefully, in a very careful manner. He used to take the same pains, okay, to climb the birch tree as you would take to fill a cup to the brim, to its edge. Okay, as you pour something inside the cup, you fill it up, and even after filling the cup, okay, if you want to keep pouring, how careful would you be not to spill the liquid inside? Okay, so in the same manner, the same kind of a painstaking manner, he used to climb upon the birch trees. Okay, and after reaching that particular spot where the tree will only bend and not break, he used to fling outward, feet first, with a swishing motion. Okay, and he used to kick through the air till he reached the ground. Okay, so this is what the boy does. This is the second movement, description about the imaginary boy who Frost thinks is the reason behind the bent birches. What kind of a boy is he? A boy from village. Okay, so very far away from town, who could not learn baseball, who plays alone summer or winter, and who had mastered the technique of climbing upon birch trees, swinging them and not breaking them, only bending them. Such a boy, okay, who lives only in the imagination of the poet. Then we go on to the third movement, okay, in the poem. So what does Frost say here? So was I once myself a swinger of birches. Okay, so this is what Frost says. I was also, once upon a time, I was also a boy like this. I was also a swinger of birches. I also used to swing upon birches. I also used to bend them, okay, when I was young, when I was a boy. And so I dream of going back to be, and I keep dreaming about going back to this phase in my life when I was a carefree young boy, swinging upon birch trees, okay, bending them. So I would like to go back to that part of my life when I was carefree, when I was a carefree boy, okay. Then it's when I am weary of consideration. Now this third part is the most important part of the poem. This is the crux of the poem. This is where Frost has left his message, okay, for us. Now, so I dream of going back to be. So when do I dream of going back to be a swinger of birches, a boy who swings upon birches, okay? It's when I am weary of considerations, when I am tired of thinking too much of troubles in this world, and life is too much like a pathless wood, where your face burns and tickles with cobwebs broken across it, and one eye is weeping from a twigs having lashed across it open. Okay, all symbolic stuff. Okay, so Frost is using this image of walking inside a parkless, a trailless forest. There is no road at all, and the forest is a dense forest. There is no path for you, and as you are walking, as you are navigating this forest, what happens? There are branches, sharp branches. Okay, you smear yourself with cobwebs, and then there is this sharp branch which had cut you across the eye, and your eye is bleeding. Okay, a very symbolic kind of a language here, very symbolic kind of a treatment here. Okay, so what is he saying here? All this symbolizes the pathless wood, cobwebs. Okay, and then your face burning, and then your eye cut by the sharp branch, and then the eye is bleeding, okay, from a twig having lashed across it open, meaning to say a sharp branch had cut across your eye. So all that symbolizes adulthood, the problems that you face, the trials and tribulations of adulthood. So that is what is being contrasted here. When Frost was a swinger of birches, he was a carefree boy, no problems at all, okay? So he used to happily climb upon birch trees, swing on them, bend them, conquer them, okay? That was one phase. Now he has come to the second phase, the adult life, okay? The adulthood, the problems that he's facing in adulthood. All of us face, okay, a lot of problems when we become adults, okay? So these from this line to this line, these lines symbolize, okay? Symbolize the problems, the trials and tribulations you face in adulthood, okay? So whenever I am bothered by the problems of life, now that I am an adult, whenever I am bothered by such problems, too many problems, okay, for me to handle, at that point of time, I dream of going back to be a boy who swings upon birches and who bends them. That is the time I want to become, once again, go back in time and be a swinger of birches, right? And then he says, I'd like to get away from earth a while and then come back to it and begin over. So I want to go away from this earth, and when life becomes too much for me, okay, lots of problems, too much for me. So at that point, I would like to leave this earth for a bit, a while, meaning for a bit, okay, and then come back to it again. That is the message, okay. I would like to go away from this earth, okay, for a bit, but then doesn't mean that I want to die. When I say that I want to go away from this earth for a bit, don't mistake me, okay? The next few lines is going to tell you, they're going to tell you that, okay? I would like to come back to it and begin over. I would like to come back to this earth. This earth is full of problems, lots of trials and tribulations, okay? I'm bothered, I cannot handle these kind of problems at all, okay? What I would like to do is take a break and go away from this earth for a bit and then come back to it and start all over again. Look at that phrase, begin over, okay? Start once again, get a fresh start. So he's not giving up. He's not an escapist, okay? He wants to come back to this earth and begin all over again, have a fresh start. And then look at those two lines. May no fate willfully misunderstand me and half grant what I wish and snatch me away not to return, okay? So Frost is saying, may no God, whatever power that you believe in. Frost was, I think, an atheist, okay, didn't believe in the existence of a God, okay. So what is it? That is why he's saying, may no fate willfully misunderstand me. So it says, no God, no omniscient being should wantedly misunderstand me and half grant what I wished for. What is a wish? To get away from this earth for a bit and then come back to it. So may no fate willfully misunderstand me and only half grant my wish, only grant half of my wish, okay, and snatch me away, not to return back to this earth, okay. There is also a reference here of an epic custom, of an where you have epic feature, okay. There is a reference to an epic feature. In epics, usually when the central character prays to gods, okay, it is customary for the epic poets to make the gods half grant the wish and to deny the rest, okay. So probably there is a reference to that kind of an epic feature, okay. So may no fate willfully misunderstand me and give me only half my wish, and may no fate snatch me away from this earth not to return, okay. Now look at that line, earth is the right place for love. That's a beautiful line, okay. That is the crux of the poem. That is the message of the poem. Earth is the right place for love. This is the right place for love and all the good things in life. This is the only place where you can enjoy beautiful things like love. This is the right place. If you leave earth, okay, I don't know where it's likely to go better. I don't know where it is going to be better, okay. I'd like to go by climbing a birch tree. I would like to go. How would I like to go when I want to escape from this earth? What is the route that I'm going to take? What is the route that I would like to take? By climbing upon a birch tree and climb black branches up a snow white trunk toward heaven till the tree could bear no more, but dipped its top and set me down again. That would be good, both going and coming back. So when I say that I would want to go away from this earth, I would like to go away by climbing upon a birch tree and going away, okay, reaching towards the heavens. And then slowly, when I reach that point where it is time for me to get down, the birch tree should slowly bend down and set me down onto the ground, okay? So that I'll come back to life and then start all over again. So that would be a good thing. That would be good, going and coming back. You could do worse than be a swinger of birches. Abruptly the poem comes to an end. Okay, so that would be a good experience going and coming back. Okay, so this is the poem. We have done a detailed description of the poem. Now to discuss the symbolic, the thematic significance of the poem talks about imagination and reality. Okay, and then adulthood and childhood, escaping the problems of adulthood. Okay, we should not think that Frost is an escapist. He himself makes it abundantly clear that he doesn't want to escape from the problems of earth, but then he would like to escape from the harsh realities in earth and then come back to it again. So you see the poem's theme, the poem revolves around adulthood, childhood. Okay, there is a juxtaposition of childhood and adulthood. There is a juxtaposition of imagination and reality, climbing birches, bending them down. Okay, so that is imagination, the boy. Okay, all of this is imagination. Okay, living in an imaginary world, and then reality. Okay, encountering the harsh realities of this life. Okay, so that is the thematic significance of the poem, and it's beautifully written in blank verse, unrhymed, iambic pentameter, and then lots of poetic devices. You see alliteration, you see assonance, you see onomatopoeia, you see similes. Okay, lots of things. You see symbolic stuff, you see symbols. Okay, so many things that the poem is full of. Okay, and as we began the poem, very simply it began with the description of the birches. Frost himself was a believer. Okay, a poem should begin in delight and end in wisdom. So it began in delight with the description of the birch trees. Okay, you saw birch trees being described, very delightful descriptions, and then it ends in wisdom. Okay, Frost advising us, please do not leave this earth. There is no other better place that we know. Come back, whatever be the troubles that you have. Okay, this is the right place. Okay, for love, for all the good things you see here in this earth. That is the message that is left by Frost. Okay, so a poem beginning in delight and ending in wisdom. Thank you very much.